Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on building whole of nation Asia literacy for the 21st century. My name is Melissa Conlon-Tyler, and I'm the Executive Director of AP4D, the Asia Pacific Development Diplomacy and Defence Dialogue. I'm joining you today from the lands of the Ngunnawal people in the high country of New South Wales, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and to any Indigenous people who are joining us today. We're delighted that we have a wonderful crowd who want to talk about this most important topic of Asia literacy. We have, I believe, around 160 people who have either will be joining us live or have registered to watch after the event. For those of you who are joining us in real time, please note we are live captioning, and you can see that with the CC icon. And we have the Zoom question and answer enabled. So please do use that to make this a conversation for the time that we have together. What brings us together today is a new paper by Philipp Ivanov, who was previous head of the Asia Society and now founder and CEO of GRASP. When Philipp came to us with this idea, I was just delighted. So AP4D has for some time been publishing a Studies in Statecraft series. The idea is that, where we can, we platform authors who are working at this intersection of how can we use Australia's tools of statecraft in a difficult and contested world. And so when Philipp said, I want to talk about 21st century Asia literacy, not something that, I don't know, is so Paul Keating, but something that is so now, we were just absolutely delighted to be able to offer this opportunity. So if you on the line think you have a paper that might suit the series, get in touch. And if you haven't read our previous papers on things like green security, clean commodities, trading, have a look at those. There's some fascinating things. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kick off with some thoughts from the Honourable Tim Watts MP. Then we'll have a panel made up of the author, Philipp Ivanov, and some other superb experts. And then we're going to throw over to you. So please do make sure that you do put some of your questions and thoughts in as we go. So let me, without any further ado, invite Tim to speak. So the Honourable Tim Watts has a huge number of hats in this new Parliament. He's chair of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Education. He's chair of the subcommittee on foreign affairs and aid. He's special envoy for Indian Ocean. He's chair of the new Colombo Plan External Advisory Group. And just personally, he has been a long-term advocate and author on these topics of Asia literacy and what Australia needs to be doing. So over to you, Tim, and thank you so much for joining us today with, I believe, an announcement.
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction, Melissa, and that forward-leading sizzle, but I'll hold the announcement for now. Let me begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of everywhere that we are meeting with today at this AP4D discussion. Let me pay my respects to elders past and present and extend those respects to any First Nations peoples joining us on the call here today. Let me acknowledge my fellow panelists here today. I'll give an introductory comment and then cede the conversation to them. But in particular, let me acknowledge the author of the timely report that we're discussing today, Philipp Ivanov. Thank you, Philipp, for your long-standing contributions to Australia's Asia capability. Philipp's report, The Renewed Case for Asia Literacy, is a timely one. Now, Philipp's long been a leading voice in Australia's Asia engagement, and this paper, I think, is a timely call to action at a critical moment. Now, for decades, Australians have known that our future prosperity and security will be shaped in our own region, in the Indo-Pacific. And there have been 40 years of reports to government that have made this case. In the 1980s, the Garneau Report, Australia and the Northeast Asian Ascendancy, started Australia's Asia capability journey. And since then, there've been a successive drumbeat of reports saying pretty well the same thing. Ken Henry's Asian Century White Paper, Peter Varghesi's Indian Economic Strategy to 2035, Nicholas Moore's Australia Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040. The message is the same time and again. If Australia wants to shape our own future, We need Asia capability, the mix of cultural understanding, language faculty, and regional experiences that we need to be effective in Asia. Now, as Philipp's report points out, the case for Asia literacy has never been stronger than in the changing international environment that Australia currently faces. The Trump administration is pursuing a different role for America in the world. China is seeking to change the regional balance of power. Our neighbours in Southeast Asia are seeking to navigate their own way in an increasingly challenging strategic environment. Now, in response, the Albanese government has lifted our diplomatic, defence and development engagement with our region to, I think, unprecedented levels, using all of the tools of statecraft to maximise our influence in the region. But back home, within our borders, the sovereign capabilities that we need to be effective in the region have continued what is now a decades-long decline. As Philipp writes, quote, "When Australia is forced to be on the front foot in Asia, our systemic capacity to educate our leaders about the region is fragmenting. Decades of underinvestment in language and regional studies, weak institutional frameworks, and a lack of coherent national strategy have created a structural Asia competency deficit." So in spite of decades of good intent, we failed to build the Asia capability we need to be influential and effective in our region. On many measures, our Asia capability has gone backwards. Of the more than 1 million domestic Australian students at Australian universities, barely 500 were enrolled in Bahasa Indonesia nationwide. That's fewer than at the time of the Garneau report in 1989. Between 2004 and 2022, there was a 75% decline in enrolments in Southeast Asian languages at Australian universities. And experts have warned that on the current trajectory, no Australian schools will be left teaching Bahasa Indonesia by 2031. High school teachers associations warn that Bahasa Indonesia teaching is facing extinction in our schools. Now, Philipp's report makes a series of wise observations about these trends and recommendations for rectifying them. I'm interested to hear the panel's observations on this report, but I want to take my prerogative as the first speaker to elevate a few of Philipp's arguments. The first is the fundamental point that Asia capability is a whole of nation agenda. Investing in Asia literacy underpins all of our tools of statecraft. It's not a trade-off between defence and diplomacy, it empowers them. Asia literacy is a sovereign capability in itself that should be integrated across our national security and economic resilience agendas. Secondly, Philipp is correct to note that modern Australia looks very different to the Australia of the 1990s when we began our Asia capability journey under the Hawke-Keating government. We can't just roll out the policy solutions of the 1990s again in the 2020s. Developments in technology, diaspora, and mobility all open new opportunities for what Philipp calls track 2 Asia literacy. And thirdly, and this is a point that I must say is often overlooked, Philipp emphasises that we, quote, must move beyond supply-side policies for development of Asia expertise. The debate about Asia literacy since the 1990s focused almost entirely on the provision of Asia literacy programs, while demand remained consistently low. I've consistently made the point to advocates over the years that unless we solve this demand problem, increasing resources for the supply side of the problem will be wasted. Now, I said earlier that Philipp's report is timely, and Melissa did flag an announcement here, and I'm happy to announce to everyone on this call that today, as chair of the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Education, I'm announcing an inquiry into building Asia capability in Australia. This inquiry will focus on the enablers and barriers to building Asia capability in our schools and universities and beyond. It'll explore strategies to stimulate demand and improve access to language learning and the role of technologies and diaspora communities. We look at how we can embed Asia capability across all sectors: education, business, diplomacy, civil society. And we'll ask the hard questions. Why have decades of policy effort failed to deliver systemic change? What will it take to make Asia capability a national priority? Now, as leaders in your fields, I welcome submissions to the inquiry to help answer these vital questions, and I am happy to consider Philipp's outstanding report as the first submission to this inquiry process. Now, as Philipp has made clear, this is not a niche ambition. It's not a soft cultural exercise. Asia capability is a central pillar of Australian statecraft. Asia capability is about whether Australia can be influential, competent, and a credible regional player, or whether we become strategically irrelevant in our own backyard. It's about managing risk, seizing opportunity, building durable partnerships in a region that is becoming more complex and more consequential every day. So Asia capability is not a luxury, it's a necessity. As Philipp writes, our resilience will depend on deep, sustained knowledge of our region across government, business, and civil society. So my challenge is, let's make the choice to build Australia's Asia capability. Thank you, Philipp, for this vital contribution to our national conversation.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for continuing to be part of this conversation. We really appreciate that you're finding the time to have this discussion. And as I say, I hope that our now over 100 live participants decide to use the Q&A and put in some ideas and some thoughts that they would like everyone's views. So, Philipp, you've been told this is now the first submission in this today announced inquiry. Tell us why did you feel that this paper was needed right now?
Well, first of all, thanks so much, Tim, for this very thoughtful speech, and also thank you to Melissa and Tom for allowing me to publish the paper. And so I also want to thank about 70 or so people that I have spoken to about this paper and while writing it, and made some significant contributions to this. So I had 5 points. But of course, Tim has gone through all 5 of them, so I don't really have much to say anymore, apart from read the paper and let's move to Q&A. But let me just make a couple of observations. I mean, one is, that clearly we can't do the same thing as we have been doing for all these years. And I think Tim put it really eloquently there. And, I was a CEO of Asia Society for 8 years. So, I also take responsibility that things haven't progressed as quickly or as impactfully as they should be. And all of us on this call who are in this space, we do have some responsibility for why things haven't really moved in the direction that we want. But, it's clear, and not just from my report, but from many other papers by the Asian Studies Association of Australia, by the Academy of Humanities on China, that on most indicators, we have regressed in terms of our Asia literacy, state of Asia literacy here. The second point is that, the argument that I've heard, I've been in the US for the last couple of years and back now, and is that, this is a time to focus on national security and economic resilience. And, one, including the government, has to prioritize. And so this thing may be not as important. But, as we saw, during the Cold War, and I said that in the letter that I sent to some of my colleagues and friends, that the Asia literacy is a critical component of our response to geopolitical upheaval. And so you don't need to look further than the Cold War, which was won by the Western scholars of Kremlin politics and Soviet economics, as much as by diplomats and generals and intelligence officers. So it's part of how we respond to these issues as well. Third point is that that Asia literacy is a very important part of our social cohesion. And in today's Australia, it means knowing your neighbors as well as knowing the countries in the region far away from us. So it has some serious security and political as well as social implications, how well we understand our own community. But it's not all bad news, and I hope that my report makes it quite clear that second track Asia literacy, which is driven by migration, by technology, by mobility, it has contributed a lot to how well we understand the region. The initiatives like the new Colombo plan, the other scholarship programs, as well as, of course, the change in demographics, it has made us much more literate. And so, but we can't take it for granted, and it shouldn't be this autopilot to literacy. There's a very common misperception that I heard a lot is, Philip, look, we're fine because look at all our Asian migrants, here's our literacy right there. And there's so much wrong with that statement, of course. But the basic answer is this, you build capabilities across the nation, not across an ethnic cohort. And then finally, I guess I do try to get into the solutions. We diagnose the problem very well. And the solution does lie in combining these two streams. That is what our own education system is producing, or rather what's not producing. But also that second track literacy through our migration, through culture, and of course through technology like artificial intelligence, which is a really important part. So I'll just stop here, but this is the frame of the paper, really.
Absolutely. And in line with that, that's going to be the frame for this webinar as well. So we are now going to look at those, what you call second track drivers. So demography, mobility, and technology. And we have wonderful speakers who are going to take us through each of those. We're also, I think, responding to that point you made, Philip, around this not just being niche, this being core for security, for business, for national resilience, etc. So we have speakers who can take us from a business perspective, from a strategic perspective, from education, and from development. So if I can introduce them, I'm going to kick off, if I can, with you, Lydia. Lydia Santoso is the National Vice Chair of the Australia-Indonesia Business Council. And I know you've talked, people have probably seen some of the wonderful things you've been writing in the Australian Financial Review, etc. You've talked about the diaspora communities essentially as a real asset for Australia. And I'm interested, because you work so much on professional ties, how you've seen that in that field.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Can everybody hear me? Okay, perfect. Very good. Thank you. Thank you to Tim for all of your wonderful work in this space, and congratulations, well done. I think this inquiry is well needed and long overdue. So I think we can all agree that we are all behind you, and anything we can do to make this this topic front and center, we are all here. And thank you to Phil as well for writing such an important piece of work. In terms of diaspora, I think that is the missing link here, and I think it's something that we can really tap into. I've seen firsthand just how the diaspora community is one of our greatest assets in building links with Indonesia, which is the space that I live and breathe. Being of Indonesian heritage myself, I know how valuable it is to be able to move between cultures, languages, professional contexts. So that cross-cultural fluency is what creates the trust. And we all know that trust is absolutely central in underpinning those business relationships and partnership relationships and work with across the region, but also especially with Indonesia. So in terms of my work with the Australia-Indonesia Institute and the Australia-Indonesia Business Council, the diaspora professionals really are pivotal in being able to deepen that engagement. And I think we can tap into that a little bit more. I think they are, that is a resource that we don't use enough. And Tim's quite right mentioning about the diaspora community, in that they are the ones, they are almost like the living bridges between the countries and the regions. They bring to the table not only just language skills, but cultural understanding, and most importantly, those professional networks that go far beyond any trade strategy or investment plan can achieve. So when we connect Australian businesses with Indonesian counterparts, it's often the diaspora leaders who can almost translate or be that connector, not in just the language, which is also really important. And they shouldn't be connecting in language, because Australians should be able to, in the ideal world, engage in language, but also they can help with cultural expectations and relationship building. So in my work with the Institute, we are trying to create these Asia engaged people through our flagship programs, such as the Australia-Indonesia Youth Exchange Program, the Australia-Indonesia Muslim Exchange Program, and I also sit on the board of Teachers, which is a consortia which sends Australian university students to Indonesia to study. So, quite a lot of them have sort of diaspora backgrounds, who've grown up in Australia, who were born in Australia, and it's a wonderful opportunity for them to connect back with the country of origin. But also these young leaders go on to become the connectors and those deal makers, those storytellers, those living bridges, which are people to people driven. So when Tim speaks of diaspora, the diaspora as a strategic asset, I fully couldn't agree more. And especially in the Australia-Indonesia context, that those communities are just not on the margins of the relationship, but they are really the heart of it. And we really need to look into that a little bit more.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'll continue on with the theme of mobility as well, which is useful for all Australians. And one of the things we've already discussed is the new Colombo plan. So our next speaker is Genevieve Donnellan May. She is a fellow at the Yokosuka Council on Asia Pacific Studies and was a new Colombo plan scholar to South Korea. So I'd love to hear from you, Genevieve, what that mobility experience meant for you and what effect it's had on your career.
Yes, certainly. Thank you for the question and for the invitation to speak today. So as Melissa already mentioned, in 2018, I had the incredible privilege of being a New Colombo Plan scholar in South Korea. During this time, I studied at Seoul National University, and then I worked for a local think tank. I think that the experience really shaped both my personal growth and professional trajectory. Particularly because the academic rigor of studying in South Korea, very different to Australian studying standards. Alongside studying with many local and international students definitely exposed me to much more diverse perspectives on global and regional issues. And then following this, working at a local think tank was equally impactful. I think this is because I've really developed cross-cultural communication and adaptability skills, like learning how to navigate our workplace norms like hierarchy and respect, but in Korean professional settings. And I found those to be quite different from what I had previously experienced while working in Melbourne in Australia. And so this taught me to approach, I think, collaboration with much more sensitivity and awareness, hopefully skills that I'd like to think I carry forward in my work today. The timing itself of my experience of being a New Colombo Plan scholar in South Korea was also quite interesting. So I was there when President Trump, during his first term, visited both South and North Korea. So I thought that was definitely something for the history books. And then the final point I would like to make is about the networks that I've built and experienced through the NCP program, whether that's through mentors, peers, industry contacts. They all continue to open doors, whether that's for collaborations, for work-related things, like policy papers, for briefs, for op-eds and so on, whether that's for attending conferences or workshops, and also being able to recommend each other through the groups that we have, particularly on LinkedIn and via email as well. As an example of this, last week I was invited to Manila for a workshop on strategic challenges in the region. Embassy staff were also able to listen in, and during the break I was chatting to someone from DFAT who was in town for the week, and turns out she was also a New Colombo Plan scholar too, so it was really nice to be able to talk about our shared experiences as well as the conference itself. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will be coming back to you, don't worry. Now, I'm now going to Dr. Min Yan Hu, who's from the School of Humanities, Languages and Social Sciences at Griffith University. university. And I think, Dr. Hu, you can tell us a bit about people who perhaps can't travel, who perhaps don't have diaspora links, but can use technology to try to improve their Asian literacy. And I'm really interested in what you're seeing in the way that technology is changing language learning and changing cultural literacy work. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for this great invitation. And just to echo back to the panelists that shared just now, actually, before my talk, I'm very happy to lead a group of 10 students to go to China, sponsored by the NCP funding. Thanks for that. So linking to those, we observed a really sharp decrease in students' enrollments in language-related courses at universities, not only in education sectors, but also in tertiary and higher education. And as Tim observed in the opening speech, and to address this really severe situation, what we can do in higher education, for example, at Griffith University, we definitely see the advantages of using technology, including AI and generative AI now, to really engage the students into this critical thinking and the literacy, cultural literacy development, as well as the ethical considerations that are involved in all kinds of technology assisted or empowered learning platforms. For example, in our TESOL courses, we call it Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. We, instead of seeing the sharp decrease in enrollment, we have actually 200 to 300 increase, especially post-COVID wise. And we see, we're also looking at our Japanese and other languages groups, even though we were hit hard by COVID or other possibilities, but by innovating our pedagogy, reimagining the pedagogy, we can see why this kind of increase and address these problems that locally really works. For example, we provide both in the classroom and online learning options hybrid together, and we do not teach the old wine by using the new vessels. We need to really thinking, you can't really teach the literacy that we want to teach 20 years ago. So instead of doing that, we recognize how technology can actually help our learners to engage in problem solving. So the learning content, the activities, they can be assisted by technology, but we take it one level up by assessing their problem solving skills by using task-based language learning and really and also authentic case studies. So by integrating all of this together, of course, supported by the policy, hopefully we will see an increase in the future in learners' interest in language learning. I'll leave it at that. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
No, thank you. Well, I want to delve more into that if I can, Dr. Hu, because I'm interested, you're talking about the way that the university and the teachers have been adapting to the technology. What about the students as well? I'm interested in how much we do adapt quickly enough. And if we're not, what else should we be doing different?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So we're definitely adapting both as a learners and as a teacher or educators. And you can see these days, it is not an exaggeration that you can reach out to your students much quickly through social media rather than through their traditional emails or these platforms. And the learners are adapting as well. For example, in these technology-assisted or empowered courses, not every student has the same level of these technology, digital literacy, and even AI literacy. Not everyone has that as ethical considerations when engaging in those learning platforms. So we see and also taking the educators as an example. So we also have this kind of we're facing this similar situations that the efforts and to innovate, engage with the technology to bring the best affordances of technology. This needs a lot of efforts. Not so at the moment, you need research, you need practice. But at the moment, I can see from my personal perspective, this kind of efforts is quite fragmented. So it leaves up to us, whether you want to use it, whether you want to innovate your pedagogy, and also for the learners, for them to see the benefits and the affordances, how we can best support them. we haven't really have this kind of holistic, well-developed strategies, nationwide or even just statewide, right? Or university-wide, to really support us to see, how strategically and practically we can bring up the best affordances of technology to increase our literacy, not only just the cultural literacy, all kinds of literacy and problems, critical thinking skills, ethical engagement.
Well, if you're like me, everyone else in the audience, you will have another 100 questions you want to ask Dr. Hu. So please keep the questions going. Thank you to Lotte Olberg from AsiaLink, to Joel Backwell, who've been putting some questions. Now, see, I was going to go back to Genevieve. Can you hear us okay, Genevieve?
Yes, all good.
Yep, coming in. Excellent. So, I mean, I think you've talked about sort of the early stage of the journey, when you were doing mobility, you were building these connections. I mean, for me, at least, as a long-term sort of language and cultural learner, I feel like it's an ongoing journey. And so I'm interested in sort of how you try to maintain that beyond just, one mobility experience. And do you feel that there's much support for you in that journey?
All right, thanks for the question, Melissa. So in terms of how I try to maintain the focus, I think that participating in, for instance, Asia Australia youth network groups, both online and in person, has been a really big help, as well as the various professional programs that they may run, or the cultural events, and just getting to know people who have similar or shared interests as well. I think also from a more career or work-related perspective, as a researcher, being able to collaborate with peers across Southeast Asia, for instance, or South Asia, or different parts of the Asia Pacific more broadly, on all kinds of projects, whether that's a short project or a longer term project, as well as traveling to the region, not only for conferences, events, but also for personal travel, has really helped to keep my connections strong. And of course, I always enjoy watching soap operas or any kind of TV shows. I think that we're incredibly fortunate with platforms like Netflix, for instance, which means that suddenly being able to watch, for instance, a Korean television show is suddenly much more accessible, the same with something from China, and so on. So that would be my answer to the first part of the question. To the second part of the question, I think that I'd like to make two observations that both Philip and Minister Tim Watts have already mentioned, and it's really about the fragmentation as well. So with that, I would say that yes, that broader Australian society, that there is support for Asia literacy, but it's fragmented and it's uneven. So on the one hand, there's programs like New Colombo Plan, there's the Westpac Asian Leaders Program as well, and they definitely demonstrate commitment. And then there's also other aspects like the cultural festivals, which seem to be becoming increasingly popular. Having said that, I've also noticed that there's perhaps maybe a disconnect for NCP graduates. I think this is my own experience and what I've heard from other NCP graduates as well. And I understand that this is pre-COVID, so that perhaps things may have improved a little, but that those who are interested in pursuing an Asia-related career, regardless of whatever sector it is, that because we lack perhaps the decades of experience that senior directors would have, it meant that when it came to job hunting, that at that time, at least, that there were limited, highly competitive job options, and they were mainly in government or government agencies, some in the private sector or research, and that seemed to be about it. I'd like to think that it has somewhat improved since then, but from what I've heard from recent graduates, that they're still facing these few options when it comes to pursuing an Asia-related career. The second point, which I realize that our speakers have already mentioned, is about encouraging learning Asian languages in both schools and universities. I find it really interesting, given our proximity to countries like Indonesia, that we don't seem to have perhaps the levels or the numbers of students speaking Bahasa Indonesia in the way that I guess we really could be doing. Lydia, I know, wrote an excellent piece in August, I believe, for the Australian Financial Review, which points this out. So I think that these two issues go hand in hand, right? The Asian language education, and then also making clear what kind of entry-level jobs in particular for those interested in Asia literacy and who have some Asia literacy was definitely key to addressing these concerns.
Brilliant. Well, I will go to Lydia now to continue on that. You know, how do we support people? I think it's interesting, Genevieve, that you're again bringing up that sort of supply demand issue that we've talked about. So over to you, Lydia. And please do keep the questions coming in. I have another one from Natalie Pearson from New Sydney. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I mean, I think I will begin with that stark statistic that Tim opened up with Bahasa Indonesia facing extinction by 2031 in Australia. That is terrifying to me, and it just shows that, you know, we need to do more work on this front, and how important forums like this and the work that we are all doing it is. But I did write an article in the AFR, and I made that point that at the moment, far too much of our language and Asia capability stories is left to individual passion, luck, or a particular inspiring teacher. And whilst that enthusiasm is wonderful, but it isn't a sustainable national strategy. And I do agree with the points that both Tim and Phil made, that this is not the 1990s. We can't just, use the policy that we did back then. We do need a multi-pronged approach, I feel, from all levels of society. So I argue that we need a national roadmap for Asian languages that goes beyond just pilot programs for example, for Bahasa Indonesia, and also needs to transcend those election cycles. So this means a coordinated action between the federal and state governments, education authorities, and the private sector. And I'm really glad that Joel is on this call, because the AAI has given a grant to Joel to develop this roadmap for National Cabinet, and very looking forward to seeing what he has, what he will present. But we also need investment in, teacher training. We need incentives for schools, principals, students, parents who make those decisions as to what students are going to be studying. It's almost like we need to shift the narrative. And I agree with the argument that we need to look at the demand side of things. So shifting that narrative in the boardrooms, where companies value the language and value that skill, so that graduates can, achieve their career outcomes after studying the language. So I think, the reality is if we have our next generation of Australians to be regionally literate, it doesn't have to be just Indonesian, but at least in this region, we need a multi-pronged approach. We need support from all sectors of government, society, private sector, the education sector. And we need some sort of framework to assist. Dr. Hu was mentioning about needing a framework for the teachers, and understanding how AI can play a role. And I think AI can play a big role in all of this, but also not forgetting about those people-to-people, face-to-face links that are also very important. So I might leave it there.
Thank you, Lydia. And can I just say, we are getting such wonderful questions coming in. I see from Liam Prince, from Chikas, Tamerlane Beasley, from Beasley Intercultural, Martin Letts from AsiaLink. So please, panelists, get ready to answer whichever questions you want to go to. So, Philip, I'm going to come back to you. Lydia was just talking about the importance of sort of having a more harnessed approach, more of a roadmap. Can you tell us a bit more from the paper? You have suggestions for how you think Australia can better harness and coordinate in a bit of a more coherent approach. So please take us through that.
Yes, thank you. I make a couple of points in the paper about first, there has to be a statement first from from our leaders in government that these skills are just as important as, for example, STEM skills. And I know that's a big ask, but I do believe that this elevating this to this sort of critical capabilities that Australia needs will be an important point, an important signal. That my first point here. Second is, we are in the sector of very over-reliant on government. whether it's funding, whether it's signaling, whether it's narrative, structures, etc. And, in our system, the government plays a big role, but it's not the only player. And I think to some extent, government has done what it could to set the policy settings. And of course, the funding is a different story. But we do need to encourage our institutions, and we have some pretty impactful and active institutions. The one that I led before, of course, we have AsiaLink, which is a larger institution and fairly well funded by the government. We have business councils, we have DFAT councils and foundations. So the ecosystem is actually very large for a small country like ours. It's not equally funded, it's not equally resourced, but it is a fairly large community. So in some cases, those connections, connecting the threads, whether it's connecting the employers and NCP students, whether it's connecting AI with language learning. So not everything has to be driven by government. And in some cases, the institutions need to step up and drive that, of course, with the right approach and with the right support from the government. The third point is we need to be working kind of horizontally across these programs and initiatives. And I see in the chat, we are talking about the Bridge program on the new Colombo plan. And so all these programs are, and I make that argument hopefully in the paper, those programs are success stories. I don't think anyone would argue that they failed. They are very impactful. Is that how do you connect them in a coherent whole, and who's going to do that? So that's another point. And I do think that the inquiry that Teams announced is really important. But I do feel as a lot of this work has to be done outside government as well. And then my final point here is I think we let our universities get away from their responsibility in Asia literacy space. And I love universities, I grew up in them, but they're not all, but some of them are very well-resourced institutions. And their argument for closing Indonesian programs or Chinese programs or Japan or not opening new programs is that there is no demand. Well, sometimes it's about the commercial demand, and they get plenty of it when they recruit international students in Asia. But sometimes it's also about national interest. And my argument is that the national interest suggests that our universities should be doing more to support the research on Asia, whether it's on security issues, whether it's economy, whether it's languages, whether it's cultures. And I think that the university sector has to play a much bigger role than they have been doing for the last couple of decades. So I might just stop here. There's more in the paper there as well.
There is, and we'll keep putting the link in so everybody can go and read the paper in depth. Look, I think coming from the questions here, I see there being a big question that people are coming at different ways, Liam, Natalie, Lotte, about how we have our national discussion. I think, Joel, you put it that way. It's a much needed national discussion. Is there an appetite in the electorate? How can we find new audiences? Who should be doing what? So I think that's a question I'm going to go to everybody on the panel with. I'm going to give them just a tiny bit to think about that. And in the meantime, I'm going to Zoe. So Zoe Mander-Jones is the CEO of Strategic Development Group. And I've asked her to give a case study because one of the things we're talking about here is we have these second track drivers. We have mobility, we have diaspora, we have technology. we want to have more joined up approaches. And this is an example where you have government, business, development, all working together on a project that's come out of the Moore Report Invested Southeast Asia strategy. So Zoe, over to you. I'm sorry it's only a few minutes, but seeing as this is a really new initiative, I thought you would like to have a platform to tell us about it.
Thanks very much, Melissa, and look, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here presenting from Wurundjeri country in Melbourne. I've spent my background in international development. I now head up a small, lovely firm called Strategic Development Group, and we do a lot of work with DFAT. And one of the things DFAT's engaged us to do is to deliver this program called Professional Placements. And as Melissa said, I'm just going to present this very briefly as a mini case study because it does speak to some of the issues being discussed today. I hope you can all see my screen. This program, look, it's been designed in response to the invested strategy. It's very much come out of the Moore Report. It is an outbound and an inbound program for young professionals offering short-term placements in the private sector. So that's between Australia and countries in Southeast Asia. Now, these short-term placements are designed to build relationships. We've heard a lot about relationships today between businesses and to develop skills and expertise of young professionals. And I think it's a really interesting example of that alternative pathway that the paper talks about. It's a mobility program that enables professional experience and supports that second track around Asia literacy. It is a pilot program. In fact, it's a pre-pilot. It's something we call a proof of concept. And we're working very closely with DFAT colleagues in Canberra and at Post as we build, deliver, and learn through program implementation. So we're trialling lots of different approaches and we have a strong focus on refining the concept over an initial 18-month period. And ultimately, I hope, I mean, this is of course a decision for DFAT, but ultimately I hope we'll be working with DFAT to take this program to scale. Because I'd note that that concept of scaling and deepening professional exchange programs is identified as part of the solution outlined in Philipp's paper. In relation to the scope of the program, you'll see some parameters on the screen at the moment, but an important aspect I wanted to bring to light today relates to the role of government, because this is not about the Australian government sending young professionals internationally, it's the businesses doing that. And the role of government through this program is very much to encourage, to incentivise and to support businesses to do so. There is some support provided through the program. It relates to travel costs. There's some small allowances to businesses to cover administration, but there's also a lot of non-financial support, a lot of what we're doing around talking to businesses, talking to business councils, networking, facilitating those placements. Just to give you a very quick look at some of the initial placements, we had our first inbound placement in June 2025. Lovely dynamic woman from Laos coming to Sydney, focusing on startups in the energy transition space. In July, we facilitated placement into Wollongong and the creative industries. Very topically, I think currently, we have 6 Australians outbound in Jakarta, kicking off their 4-week placement today. They're working in 6 different industries, ranging from hospitality to consulting, sort of the disruptive technology to renewable energy. We also have currently a live opportunity around a 3-month internship, paid internship to Singapore. So look, it's early days, but these initial placements have been quite successful. We're hearing from host businesses, sending business participants themselves, a range of positive benefits, including professional development and new business relationships. So look, that's just a bit of a taste, and I hope it gives you a sense, I suppose, and there's more opportunities you can see on our website. But just to sum up in the context of the discussion, I think you see that this program for Australian businesses at least is very much one that can support Asian literacy through mobility, with the government playing a small, supportive, but quite strategic role. It is a program that can be seen, in my view, as a tool within a larger, potentially better integrated national effort to build Asia capability and contribute to that sort of sustained knowledge of the region that Philipp's paper talks about. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Zoe, and I very much appreciate. So Zoe's still on the line. So if anyone have more questions about that as a particular case study, please put those into the Q&A and Zoe can type an answer. Equally, if you have questions, like I know we have questions about exactly what it is that Doctor Who is doing at Griffith, again, put those in and people will respond. But what I'm going to do, I suppose, to finish up is just to give everyone that one big question, as I see it, that we can come at in different ways. That, you know, if we need a national discussion, if we need to reach the new audiences, to find the unconverted, if we need to work out who does what, who is best placed for which part of this, this is our moment to talk about it. So I might start, if I can, with Doctor Who and any thoughts you have on that question. Particularly, I noticed there was a question around how do you get to talk to, you know, to students, to their parents, to communities, to see the point of this. So starting with you, and then I'll keep going back across the panel.
Thanks, Melissa. Lovely. I just replied to that question in the Q&A, and I would love to answer it again here. And I'm very much agree with the leader's early comment that we really need multiple pronged approaches to this. So in terms of this specific question in relation to how we can really reach out to, you know, communities, parents, students, I think I've noted down a little diagram on my paper that we really need these three main pronged areas. We definitely need leadership support, you know, from the university and our school level. We made that announcement and recognized in the policy paper that internationalization is everybody's business at Griffith University. We also at our school, we have that we have this kind of mission. We says that language and intercultural competence is a must in our graduates' attributes. And for that, we also got lovely funding from the government. So you need money to be able to bring those lovely projects to life. And we make the best effort to reach out to the diasporas groups, like including me and our Japanese teachers here. And at Griffith, at our School of Humanities, Languages and Social Science, every year we reach out to the local schools and we provide language experience day and we invite, you know, the state school, other school students come to Griffith to have this, you know, fun-packed and learning day at Griffith. And today, actually starting from today to all the way to the end of this first week of school holidays, for every school holiday, we provide this beginner language program to our state school students, and also regularly our language group, our teachers, led by our program director, we offer this initiative to like a cheese and chat sessions for the language for the parents of local parents to come to have talk with us to see what kind of programs do you think you really need to see that we can support your children to build up their language capacity and intercultural competence, and to infuse their interest in language learning and cross-cultural learning. So all of this together, I think, yeah, it is really, and by using the technology these days, you can reach out to more people rather than by the traditional channels. And we do agree that technology is the catalyst, and it's not the real things that drives the people's motivation and interest. It is a people to people's connections. And also, it also depends on what kind of programs, the curriculum, the strength. Yeah.
Got it. Oh, thank you. And I think that might answer a bit Lisa Heyman's question. Many of those things you talked about are equally true in the school education sector. So can I go to Genevieve? You're next, aren't you?
Oh, thank you. So in addition to all of the interesting points that Doctor Who has already raised, I thought I'd also mention that I think that for parents and those in the community, particularly if they have children who are interested in pursuing a career or just a general interest in relation to Asia, I think that soft power and cultural exports are incredibly effective. We've seen this not only with the rise of the Korean exports in terms of food and the cultural aspects as well. Something I wanted to bring up also is that before studying in South Korea, I had previously obtained a Chinese government scholarship to study at Fudan University in China. I told my parents that I would be going to China for a year, maybe not returning, and they were very persuasive about it, which I thought was fantastic. Having said that, I heard a lot of negative comments from people closely or linked to my parents and some extended family members who didn't quite understand what I would be doing in China, why I would be going, or what on earth I was going to do there for the whole time. I think that their concept of China in comparison to what was happening at the time in China, this is around 10 years ago, was incredibly different. So I think that in response to the question, I think that soft power and finding avenues like that to really be able to show to the wider community about how important it is, but also the options that are available there.
Thank you. Great. Over to you, Lydia.
Thank you. There are some really amazing questions and great people here who are my allies as well. So I think in terms of how we broaden that question to a national question and try to get the unconverted converted, I feel like, my multi-prong approach. So, my dream would be to make Asian language compulsory in primary schools, get them in early. I've been on the selection panels for NCP scholarships for a number of years, and I think it's an incredible program, but I feel like we need to target the students earlier. So, compulsory Asian language into primary school, then get them on exchange in high school over to the region, and then continue those pipelines for the IEPs, IMEPs, NCPs, and the like. In terms of the business world, I think we need to target not just the CEOs, but the board who makes decisions for the company, and to really get them to understand the region and the importance of these language skills, cultural fluency. We need to showcase more successful stories of Australian graduates doing well in the region. And we need more Asia sort of, examples into our curriculum, into our media. I mean, my kids are just so addicted to the K-pop and the songs at the moment. I just like on repeat. So we need more of that. We need more stories. We need things more in media. We need more of those exchanges. I've actually worked with Zoe's colleague, Michael Collins, here in Sydney, in getting those placements happening. And it is a fantastic program. I wish more businesses would jump on it. And I think they will, because it's such a new program. But those types of opportunities are just really incredibly important in this conversation.
Great.
I'll leave it there.
To you, Philip.
Forever.
Thanks very much. Hard to follow. There's very, very inspiring and very, very correct, I think, recommendations of where we're going to go. But just a couple of final thoughts. Number one, I think leadership is very important in this. And I think that we actually have leaders in the community, in our sectors, that can drive that. And we all need to do that every day, from speaking to, a student that wants to do Asian studies but finds it difficult to imagine a career with it in the future, to speaking to ministers and business leaders. So leadership is really critical. But second thing is the details are also important. Like, what are we actually trying to solve? And someone in the chat mentioned things like security clearances, which is, Canberra's best kept secret. We do need to have people from different communities and of different backgrounds to be working in our government. And those security clearances are hard to obtain because of these backgrounds and family links. And I think every little problem like this will need to be discussed and solved in the context of a broader Asia literacy conundrum that we're trying to solve. So details are important. The third thing is that I think institutions are very important, and we have very good ones. And I mentioned Asia Society, I mentioned Asia Link, I mentioned the Business Council. Institutions have to drive that as well. And then finally, I just think that we have to keep at it. This is not a static problem that, you can solve and move on and everything is going to be okay. I think this is an ongoing endeavor and we just have to keep at it. So I'll stop here.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I've taken from today is that it is very much a whole of nation endeavour. We've been delighted to have all of you speak on the panel, but honestly, everyone in the question and answer has also had so much to share. And what I see here is a community of people who do care about these issues, who want to work together and see how we can change that national conversation. So I'm going to leave the last moment with Tim, and I hope that takes the pressure off a bit. It's not just about leadership coming from you, it's leadership from all of us. And if you have any last thoughts on how we can support that, we'd love to.
Well, I would point everyone to the parliamentary inquiry that we'll be running for the next 6 months or so. But I'd also say that I think it's important that we keep the conversation happening in the broader community. There's a couple of comments about in the chat around how we transform this from a kind of eat your vegetables type message to a how do we instill, passion and demand for Asia capability across the country. And I think part of that is having a conversation that really reveals how dynamic and interesting and full of opportunity our region is across the community. So I want to be a part of that conversation, and I invite everyone on this call to join it.
And I think with that, not having done my duties as well as I should, we are over time. So I will say a huge thanks to everyone who joined us today as to be part of this conversation, whether you were in the audience, whether you were one of the speakers. I think we've had a very fine conversation. If you have not yet looked at Philipp's paper, now is the time to do it. Look at the link, open the link. And if you're not involved with AP4D networks, please do subscribe to us on socials, YouTube, wherever it is, because we have lots of fun events just like this in the future. Thank you all again, and thank you to the AP4D team for putting this together.